Now let's work on rapidly improving your skills and your proof points so you can compete for and win and get that PM job that you're looking for. First of all, how do you prioritize your time? Are you working on your weaknesses? Are you improving your strengths? To give you a framework for that, let's review the behavioral attributes and skills and the functional skills that we talked about earlier. On the behavioral side, I believe, in my experience from what I've seen, that every successful PM has the first six here pretty solid. Strategic thinking, communications, leadership and execution, empathy and collaboration, relentless curiosity, and bias towards action. I don't think you can be a successful PM without all of those. And then the final three, competitive spirit, creativity and cleverness, poise under pressure. I believe these come in different shapes and sizes, and they may accelerate to go from a senior PM to a director to a VP, or it may be specific to the situation. But I believe the first six are fundamental, and then the last three can take you over the edge or help you get promoted or accelerate your career, or maybe more important in different situations. But to get in the door and either break in for the first time, or if you're a PM and a senior PM out there looking for a job, I would really make sure you're solid at the first six. And competitive spirit is an interesting one. I think a lot of times that's innate in people after a certain point where you're either hungry to win or you're not. I'm not sure you can develop that over time. But functional, you can definitely develop over time. So on the functional skills, here is a framework here. First of all, let's admit there's a lot of different functions involved with being a product manager. That's why it's so dynamic. It is a composite sport that has a lot of different tools, and you have to use different tools at different times, and you have to be comfortable with a lot of them. And my framework, the best that I've ever seen, is you draw two imaginary lines and you look at each of these skills, and the first line is bare minimum. If you're not above this, you can't get the job. Or if you're in the job and you're not above this, you're going to get fired. And then the second line is world class. If you're above this, you're truly one of the best in the world at performing this skill. And the best use of your time and energy is to find ones that are near the bare minimum, make sure they're above the line. And then find ones that could be within striking distance of world class and close that gap and get them to world class. If you're a 2 out of 10 on something and you need to be a 3, you better get that over the line or it's going to hold you back forever. And if you're a 7 out of 10 and you can get it to a 9.5, that is a tremendously valuable use of time, because being a 9.5 out of 10, that provides next level impact. And for you, it can be lucrative in your career. If you're a 4 out of 10, you get to a 6 out of 10, that's a yawn. Nobody cares. If you're just okay and you're a little better at being okay, it's not getting you fired. It's also not really moving the needle on the world-class side. And so think about it this way. I'll give you an example on my behalf. When I look at these skills and attributes, I'm very strong at the analytical components and then the storytelling components. So on the analytical side, finance. I've spent a lot of time understanding how businesses operate and all of the different metrics and the finance and the P&L and what drives the business. Also, a technical background around data and engineering and these components, which allows me to have a very analytical, structured approach to say, here's the vision, here's the strategy, here are the objectives and key results, here are some risks we need to mitigate, here's the plan over the next 6 months, and here's really strong, sound reasoning for why we're doing what we're doing. Also, on the storytelling side, I am effective at marketing and sales, either building relationships and trust with enterprise customers and getting them to work with us, or on the marketing side, telling a story that resonates. And my 1-2 punch is connecting that analytical component with the storytelling component. And I recommend that everybody develop a 1-2 punch. You can be really good at one, and that's fine. But if you're good at two, especially if they're unrelated and you pull them together, that's what creates magic in your career. Now, on my side, on the more weakness side, I'm not a world-class designer or a world-class operations person. On the design side, I'm very effective at user research, but when it comes to visual interaction design and visual design, I think I have a good eye for it. I actually really enjoy it, but I augment myself by partnering with designers and working with designers or hiring designers. I am not a world-class designer, and I never will be. So I need that skill to be good enough, and I can facilitate an environment where effective design can happen, but I'm not investing in becoming a world-class designer. Also with operations, I am very effective at sitting in a room and stress testing the plan and making sure we've thought of all of the risks and making sure that's really the right goal and the right strategy and the right thinking. But when it comes to this thing's due at 9 a.m. on Thursday, did all of the pieces happen so that it's shipped at 8:59 a.m. on Thursday every single time? Some people are world class at that. I am okay at that. I will never be world class at that. And so I'm not investing my time in trying to be world class at something I never will be. I've worked, especially during the first 10 years of my career, a lot on being better at time management and being better at operating and being better at these components. And so I believe I'm in the zone where I'm good enough, but it's never going to be my world class, nor is design. But the other ones, the analytical, the data, the engineering, the finance, and the business, mixed with the storytelling like marketing and sales, that's my specialty. And you should find yours and really invest in that. You don't have to know it immediately. You don't have to know it today, but it's important to have that framework to think about it, get above the bare minimum, and then invest in world class. What are the best strategies now that you know where to invest your time so that you can rapidly make improvements? The first one, raise your hand. There is a scene in The Bourne Identity where Jason Bourne, the character, has amnesia and he's a special operative with a tremendous number of physical and mental skills, and he has this lady Marie with him, and he goes to a hotel where he had spent a night back in his old identity, which he doesn't remember, and he's trying to get information from what he was doing. And so he has a plan to go into the hotel and take down the whole place and fight everybody he has to in order to get a receipt from when he was staying there so he can learn more about his identity. And he sends Marie in, and he asks her to find out how many guards there are, how many exits, how many weapons, where everybody is, and come back and give him a report so that he can go in and storm the joint and take it down. And then she comes back and she hands him the receipt. And he's like, what happened? And she goes, I just asked for it. He's like, you just asked for it? She said, yeah. He says, oh, okay. And then the scene moves on. And so the point is, sometimes you just have to ask. People think everything is so complicated and so fancy, and they come to me and say, hey, I want to be a product manager. It'd be great if I could take on an extra project. And I say, well, have you asked? They say no. And so nobody's going to give it to you if you don't ask for it. And so number one is simply raise your hand. If you're in a company today, especially in a budget-conscious environment, which we all know we are in, there are a lot of projects that aren't funded, and there aren't enough people to do everything. And so that means on one side it's stressful. On the other side, there's a lot of opportunity for you to raise your hand and say, I would like to work on that. I'll put in 10% extra time, extra effort, so that I can get some experience. It's going to help you, and it's going to help me. Now, if you're not in a job, let's say you're in business school and you're looking for a job or something like that, then you can raise your hand in a nonprofit context or raise your hand in a for-profit context, but say, hey, I know you're having an event. Can I go to the event and just help check people in for you? I'll work for free, and in return, I get to do some networking and meet some interesting people or get some exposure or get some experience in sales or marketing. Raise your hand constantly. Try to get in and do work for people and ask. And sometimes you're going to get rejected, and you have to get okay with that. Either as an entrepreneur or as a PM, you got to be willing to raise your hand and ask. So that's strategy number one. One of the best ways to get experience that you don't have today, and the results from this can be very fast. The second one, get closer to the PM job. And so we talked about match. Are you in the right industry? Are you in the right company type? Are you in the right problem type? Are you in the right customer type? Are you in the right function? And if you don't have all of those, if you don't have the home run yet, you want to get closer. And so if you're at an investment bank and you want to work as a PM in a tech startup, maybe you can get a finance role at a tech startup, and you've made yourself one step closer because at least you've leaped the gap of industry. Now you have less gaps to leap. Or let's say you become a program manager, and it's very close to product management. It is not a product manager, but you're working with product managers. And when that product manager is on vacation or on maternity leave or whatever it is, maybe you can step in and you can do some of the product work until they come back. And so putting yourself in pole position means right there so that you get some of the exposure of product management, but also being able to do it. Back to Jiro Ono and the craftsmanship behind this. I'm here to help you become a PM. I am here to help you do the lifelong learning of getting better and better at your craft. And sometimes it's leaping straight into the driver's seat on the most exciting project ever and the perfect function, the perfect job, the perfect company. And sometimes it's, hey, this is stepping stones. I'm going to get one step closer. I close the gap of the industry. I close the gap almost of the function, but not quite. I close the gap of the customer type. I close the gap of the problem type. And now finally I became a product manager. And you got to be willing to work through the steps if that's what it takes. Let's go one step at a time. Let's get there. Another one here, do things that do not require other people's permission. You have to require somebody's permission to get a job. Even if you raise your hand, you're asking for extra, maybe you have to have somebody's permission. But there are a lot of things that you could do without anybody's permission. And this is how I started my PM career. From 2006 to 2008, I was at Goldman Sachs, and I was a business analyst at a large investment bank. Wanted to become a startup entrepreneur or a PM at a startup. And so what did I do? I just started building things and I started learning. In 2007, I built a product called Interview Shark. And so I registered interviewshark.com. I did not know anything about domain name services and registries and how that operated. I just figured it out and I learned a lot by doing that. I didn't know anything about PHP and I learned some software. I was an electrical engineer by background, so I had a lot of the mindset and the training to solve problems, but I did not know how software operated. I was not a computer scientist. And I figured out Drupal, which was this open source project built on PHP where I could build a website with content, and I learned web development and I taught it to myself and I put it online, and it's very similar to what is now known as Glassdoor, where people could come on and talk about companies and talk about interviews at companies. And I had 50 different posts on this site about people's interview experiences at different companies. And I drew this with a Sharpie and I scanned it in and I put it on the web and I learned a ton. I was just building things. And that didn't work out. It didn't turn into a big company. Glassdoor did, but man, it was a great learning experience. Next up, 2008, a year later, I kept at it. I started another thing called High Tech Weekly, and it was about high tech stories about what was going on in Silicon Valley and New York and around the world. And I learned about web analytics and I learned about online advertising. I learned a ton by doing this. And again, $8 a month in web hosting and a bunch of self-taught stuff. I started learning about databases, and I used something called Google App Engine, which was the precursor to Google Cloud. Learned a lot about NoSQL databases and data models and data structures, and I was just a sponge for learning. $8 a month and a little grit and hustle. Kept learning. And then the next up, 2009 to 2012, I launched a company called Seamless Receipts, which helped brick and mortar retailers offer personalized promotions to people inside a text or email receipt. And this is where I learned to sell. And I ultimately raised funding for this company and grew it, raised $1.5 million, hired a team, built it, sold the company. And so this was a startup experience where I really became a product manager for the first time. But I hadn't really gotten anybody's permission to do it. I just went and I did it. And from 2009 to 2012, that's where I learned how to sell. And also at that same time period, I built my own blog, keithcowing.com. And this has iterated over time in terms of my audience and my focus and my blog posts. But this is where I learned how to write and how to speak and how to teach. And when I was in business school, I attracted a lot of attention from people that were hiring because of blog posts, where I didn't even know the job was there, so I couldn't go apply to it. But people came to me and saw things that I had posted on the internet, thought that my thought process was compelling, and asked me to talk, and I ended up getting more job offers from writing blog posts than I did from anything else. And how many of your classmates, if you're in school, are writing blog posts? Are you? How many of your competitors in the market are writing blog posts? Are you? Think about this. Just differentiate yourself and just do stuff that you love, and it's fun and it's exciting. So in terms of your strategy, when you're doing things that don't require other people's permission, this could be an online tool like I built, and an app. In today's world, it could be using ChatGPT and connecting it in with a Zapier or an if this then that, which are really simple tools that enable you to automate and connect services together. So an email comes in and you automatically take it and you send it to the API at OpenAPI, have ChatGPT run something on it, you generate a video or a movie or an image or an email or something out of that. You could do a lot of interesting things without technical capability if you just have technical curiosity. And it doesn't even have to be software. I was talking to somebody who wanted to be an entrepreneur, wanted to be a product manager, and we were brainstorming what he could build. And it turns out he's a big lacrosse player. And so he ended up organizing an event around lacrosse. And it started small, and then over time he ended up getting it sponsored and having brands involved and having a tournament. And that was building an event, building something where you got it from 0 to 1, and some of the skills that are involved with that are very similar to launching a software product. So it could be an organization, it could be an event. At the very least, get a blog on a website going and start posting. If you haven't done that yet, post a LinkedIn long form blog post. Do that tomorrow. Think of some interesting ideas, run it through ChatGPT to improve your grammar and get it out into the world, but just get going with things that don't require other people's permission. Last two, be a content junkie. Whenever you have a question, go on Wikipedia. It's a tremendous resource. Go on YouTube, watch videos, read blog posts, listen to podcasts, watch videos. Take advantage of all of the time that you can to learn and start closing the context gap. When you have knowledge about something and you notice a hole in it, reading up about particularly AI right now, it is cutting edge. And so there are folks that are deeply in it and really understand it top to bottom. For everybody else, it's a wide open world. So why not become the expert in it? Nobody is an expert that isn't truly working on it right now. And so you have an opportunity to learn things that other people don't even know. And then outside of that, just constantly be a sponge. Ask questions and learn, and ask questions and learn. And when you sit down and you have conversations with people during interviews and during networking, it will show that you understand the industry. When you're making an industry jump, it shows that you have been learning and you've been a sponge, so you're going to be able to make that leap because you're already talking like you're on the other side of it. When you're making a function leap, you're talking like you've already been a product manager. A customer type leap, a problem type leap. All of these things, being a content junkie helps you show that you're going to make that leap because you've already done some of it. You're not waiting for somebody else to train you. You're just making it happen. Which brings me to the last one, which is shift the risk reward ratio. Constantly be thinking about what risk is a hiring manager taking on me? How do I reduce that risk? These different jumps that you're making. And what's the reward? What are they getting for that risk in terms of what I bring to the table that other people don't? And how do I bring that reward to life? And how do I really lean into it? That risk reward ratio, make the reward glow and slowly shave down the risk. As you improve both of those, then you can tell the story and then you can close these gaps. Then you can get the job you're looking for. Now let's jump right into setting goals for the next 30 days. How are you going to get there as quickly as you can? And in the next 24 hours. I want you immediately after this class making progress and having momentum towards those outcomes that you're excited about. So we've got a few exercises and it will only take about 15 minutes and it could change your life. So number one, write down what risk is a hiring manager taking on you. For me, when I was working at Goldman Sachs between 2006 and 2008, the biggest risk was I was not at the time working with end customers. I was building software and building products, but internally in a back office mindset at a large investment bank. So I had to jump industries and I had to convince people that I knew how to build product where I had a market to attack and I was competing against competitors and I was selling something to an end user and working with the customer as opposed to building software for internal bankers and traders where I had a captive audience. It was a really different environment. So that was the risk. You need to believe that I can build product for an end customer, that I can work with customers, and I can jump into the startup mentality. And then why is it worth it? Why are they going to take that risk reward trade-off on you? What's the upside? And for me, I went out and I reduced the risk by saying, well, I've done all of these things to really show that I understand what it's like to work with end customers. I integrated into the startup scene in New York City. I was constantly talking to people and learning and being a sponge. And I showed that through hustle and grit, I had a bias towards action that was going to overcome a lot of people that I was competing against. And I started to shift. The risk is going down because I'm showing that I understand what it's like on the other side of this leap. And the reward is going up because, man, am I going to work hard when I get in there. I am hungry for it. What skills do you need to get above the bare minimum? Write that down. Think about it. The functional skills, and then also think about the behavioral and those skills and attributes. And which skills could you be world class at? And between the bare minimum and the world class, That's your focus area, where you're going to spend your time and energy. Then, what proof points will reduce the risk and increase the reward? And I don't mean you talking to somebody and debating your skills. I mean showing them something that proves your skills. Me launching a website was a way to prove something. It was a proof point. What are your proof points? What are you going to do next 30 days? And then break that down. One of the problems here is that people frequently find it daunting to think about these big projects. It takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of energy. I'm not sure if I'm going to get there in time. But break it all down. Every amazing journey was not amazing in the first 3 steps. The first 3 steps are really simple. One foot in front of the other. So break it down. Say, what's the first 20 minutes or 1 hour? And then what's the next 1 hour? What's the next 1 hour? If you did 3 things to get started, what are the first 3 things? 1 hour each. And what I would like you to do is dedicate 20 to 60 minutes a day. 60 minutes would be the goal. 20 minutes is a minimum, so you're always making progress. And work on your projects and move the ball forward. It's amazing in 24 hours and then in 30 days how far you can get. When I was starting InterviewShark.com, the first step was go register a URL. And so I went and I looked it up and I got caught up. Maybe it was more than an hour, but I got caught up in the energy and the momentum and it didn't feel like it. I didn't know how a domain name registry worked. I figured it out. I registered the URL. Bang. The next up, draw a logo and scan it in. Next up, write your first post. Next up, figure out what platform I'm going to use, etc. But 1 hour at a time. 1 hour at a time. Think about how much time you're going to spend watching television, for example, this week. This one resonates with a lot of people. Maybe you're not watching TV, but a lot of people have their shows. So what if you took a week without television and just worked on this? And then trust me, after you get your dream job, you can go back and binge watch and celebrate. 20 to 60 minutes every day. Baby steps. Just get going. And then where can you be in 30 days? Don't think 2x, think 10x. There's this exercise in business which is pushing your thinking. A sales team comes up and says, hey, we think we can grow sales by 20% over the year. And then the challenge is, well, what if you're going to go 10x? And you come back and say, well, we can't possibly grow 10x because we're not structured the right way. We'd have to automate all these processes. We'd have to be in 3 different geographies. We'd have to have sales teams running on their own instead of the way that we're operating today. And then the question is, well, why shouldn't we do those things? Why shouldn't we go get into 3 geographies? And why shouldn't we automate the processes and enable the sales team to operate on their own? And then you start thinking through it. Maybe you don't end up with 10x, maybe you end up with 3x. But if you challenge yourself at an order of magnitude level, if 30 days from now your story looks completely different because of proof points that highlight these functional skills and these behavioral skills, not to discuss, but to show the progress, what would that look like? And how impressive and exciting would it be? Write it down, think about it, think 10x, and then go make it happen.